Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of Yotewo podcast. And today we have Garat from Verdance Ventures. Man, thanks so much for coming. First of all, it's an honor. We only met a few days ago on the LinkedIn, so it's pretty quick how we got to the podcast. So yeah, it's good to meet you in person, and thanks so much for coming. I think maybe let's start with a bit of intro of yourself, and then we'll get to the questions.
Yeah, but no, first of all, thank you for having me. Intro, so I'm a recent graduate, University of Cambridge. Also a founder, or I'll get a bit into it explaining it, but I'm a founder at Verdance Ventures, and part-time, or not part-time, but right now I'm like interning at Love Ventures as a venture capital associate.
Cool, amazing. That's great. I think let's start with a bit I'm really interested in. So you recently graduated from Cambridge. So
Yeah.
First of all, my huge congratulations to that.
Thank you.
It's a super big achievement. Can you share, just generally, how was your experience at Cambridge? How is the startup ecosystem here? Just anything you want to share about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think going to Cambridge, there's a lot of whiplash.
Okay.
Like I think instantly like adjusting to the ecosystem or like what it is like socially was a little bit difficult at first, but then I think I kind of like became like climatized to what it was.
Okay.
And I think I really did enjoy Cambridge. I think it's quite an entrepreneurial, it's quite like a fast-paced ecosystem. So originally I did my 3 years doing like geography, so I was also studying like politics, economics, like sociology, more like social sciences. But in my 4th years, when I went to like the business school, I was more so like interested in like meeting like entrepreneurs. I was understanding like the startup space. And that's when I was a lot more hands-on with like what's going on in like business. And I guess like part-time, or not part-time, but like alongside my studies, I was also like, I went to Homerton College for like context. And I was in like the Homerton College like Changemakers program. I was one of like their ambassadors. And I guess that was like largely influential for, I guess, the path to getting to like where I am now. But I think Cambridge was an interesting ride.
Yeah.
It was a great time. It was like academically rigorous, but I guess you go to those institutions because that's kind of what you crave.
Yeah.
But no, it was a great time, definitely.
Is it like the same as a lot of people like have this expectation that Cambridge is like very kind of old-fashioned, conservative? But is it actually like that?
I think you can find that. I think Cambridge affords you the opportunity that you can find what you're looking for. If you want it to be like, really sleek and modern, and it to be like really based on like, networking and exploring those interests, I think you really can. But if you really want to lean into like the tradition of things and, go to the old dinners and go to like those kind of clubs, I think you can find that. Cool. I think that's not a side that I really like leaned on. It wasn't really my interest. But I think there's definitely traditions or like cycles that are kind of unescapable with Cambridge. You do find the tradition,
So there's pretty much this side of like a modern Cambridge as well that you can still experience while
no, definitely. The old things are never gonna leave. Like when you go there and you do like matriculation and you do formal dinner and you do like ceremonies and you have to wear like these gowns. Cambridge is always going to be Cambridge, I suppose.
That's cool. Amazing. What about the startup ecosystem there? Because, a lot of people know Cambridge, like, I mean, in the startup ecosystem, a lot of people know Cambridge for the angel syndicates that are like originated in Cambridge. Like, how is it there, like, from your experience?
I think Cambridge is massive for life sciences. So like the science parks, student run clubs, even like university, like student partnerships with like different like incubators.
Nice.
It's massive, I think. There's people doing like all sorts of things, and I think the only problem with the Cambridge ecosystem is that it's almost like decentralized. So like different colleges like run initiatives, and then there's like student-led initiatives. So like King's College has like their entrepreneurial lab. Homerton has like their Changemakers program and the fund with that. Lucy Cavendish does their own like entrepreneurs prize. I think Cambridge's problem is that so many people are doing so many things and they're all doing them in different areas. It's almost hard to find where all these people meet. But I think the Judge Business School does like a decent job at like hosting events or hosting like opportunities for these like people from the disparate groups to like be in the same place.
Cool. That's interesting. Yeah, because I didn't know that because, I studied myself at UCL and we had this incubator at UCL which is like, it's not linked to any like department or faculty. It's just like, it just exists as its own office in the King's Cross, and then just people from all of the UCL who have some like startup ideas or whatever, they all kind of go there. And then from there, just I've recently heard this guy's got to YC or something. So it's like it's pretty centralized in that sense. So I had an idea that Cambridge is somewhat similar, but then there are different colleges, and then makes sense, I think, kind of.
Yeah, I think there's like so many assets, so there's so many resources, and even with like new parts of Cambridge that are being built, like the West Hub. There's like specific like science like innovation programs. That are like on the edge of the city, and those would be like completely removed for anything that's going on inside the city. So it's a bit difficult to to navigate as a student.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, how's your just experience when you just came there? Like, what was your first impression for the first year? Or, like,
I think when I first got to Cambridge, it was almost like a get me out of here like kind of situation.
Okay.
Like I remember like I had moved in, I had like put all my stuff into my room.
Yeah.
Like my parents have left at this moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like just walking around like the college and just like, I haven't really met any friends. I haven't really like met anyone formally. And I was just so overwhelmed by like the grandioseness of everything. And I think like doing things like, you know, the rituals and like matriculation or like going to your first lectures, I really did feel out of my depth, I think, at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think eventually you kind of take on like the norms and values of the institution and you feel more like comfortable, you feel more familiar. I think that big name is intimidating, even if you've like got in.
Yeah, of course.
And I think imposter syndrome is like something that I think nearly every student gripes with at some point, like feeling like, oh, I'm a part of like, oh, I'm a cog in this like massive machine. Like, where do I like belong? What do I do?
Yeah, that's interesting actually. Yeah, because that's pretty interesting. Because it was like, I mean, I went to for my bachelor's, I went to University of Surrey. It was like way smaller university, but I had kind of like the same, like when I was just my first year, and it was my first time in England in general. Like it was like I was 17 and I came here first time, and I was I felt extremely like out of my plate, you know. And then by the third year, I was like already kind of the local, and it was way easier. But how was the studying there? Like, is it actually hard?
Yeah, it was hard. I really, it was really hard, to be honest.
Yeah.
My first year, I really struggled.
Yeah.
I think second year and third year and then fourth year, like I was like in the groove of it. But I think that like, well, we have a system that like we have like supervisions, which is like small like focus groups, like study sessions, almost like seminars, but like in really small groups. And I think that can be really intense because a lot of like the learning and the actual consolidation of information is done independently. Yeah. And I think there's like a great responsibility to kind of like figure out how you work. Yeah. And I guess in like contrast to like A levels or GCSE where there's like a curriculum. Yeah. When you're at Cambridge, it's kind of like you have to figure it out yourself. You have the academic in front of you and you have like the papers. Yeah. But like making the link is really like challenging. So I think that was really hard. But I think eventually you start to like exercise like the critical thinking. Yeah. You become like more plastic to the information. I think you're fine.
Makes sense. Yeah, you know, you just remind me of one funny situation. I remember when I was also doing my first year. I remember we had like first like 1 or 2 lectures or something, and then there were like a couple of friends that I had, and we went to like the ones that I just met, you know. Yeah. And then we went to the library, and they just started doing something on their laptops, and I was just like, it was like first couple of days of the uni, I had no idea what they're doing, and I had no idea what I should do. So I was just like randomly sitting there. I was like, okay, so what is actually self-study? Because where I come from, we don't have this like this concept of like self-studying. It's just like you go to school, you go to uni, you do whatever you're told, and that's it. Okay. And I was so surprised when I had this like, actually, you actually need to figure out yourself like what's the best way for you.
Yeah, no, I think that can be one of the most challenging parts, to be honest.
Yeah, cool. That's pretty interesting. Okay, and let's get to the point of Verdance Ventures. So can you tell me a bit more about this concept? How you saw the problem, you know, general, how did you go about it? Yeah.
So I guess like Verdance Ventures, like as an idea, kind of came from like the Cambridge Catalyst Fund. Okay. Oh, sorry, the Homet and Changemakers Catalyst Fund. Yeah. So the Catalyst Fund kind of seeks to empower students by like putting some money towards like a social enterprise, a business idea, something that seeks to like change the world. Yeah. How did I come up with Verdance Ventures? Well, co-founder, I wasn't solely my idea, but we were kind of like problem solving. Yeah. Like what are problems that students are currently facing? And I had previously interned at Love Ventures, like in venture capital, startups, VC. This was like kind of like my interest points at the time. I found that a lot of students, like even Cambridge students, like who were like academically brilliant, some had internships, some had work experience. Yeah. Were finding it really hard to like get touch points in like really meaningful work. Yeah. So originally we kept it like broader to like be in like the green tech space, but more narrow in the green tech space. But then we ended up broadening the concept. So the concept is kind of like bridging this gap between student, like graduate employment market being terrible. Yeah. The argument that like graduates are now like less skilled or they're underskilled for like entry level positions, even though entry level positions should be entry level by nature. Yeah. So we kind of wanted to go about doing this program where you could pair students and startups through this like structured like platform program, allowing students to like, if it's through project or if it's through like micro internships, like almost bridging that gap. So I think it's really important, at least from what I've seen, kind of working in a VC that's simultaneously a startup. Yeah. you get so much like hands-on experience, and
Exactly, yeah.
your role is almost nebulous in a sense because you're not doing one thing. You're doing a bit of marketing,
Yeah,
a bit of product, a bit of like user interface, you're
Yeah.
interacting with clients, a bit of finance, you're looking at statements.
Yeah.
So I think
Good point, yeah.
working with like startups, I think was one of the most impactful ways that you can kind of get students
Like
into the job
multi-skilling,
market.
yeah.
You can like skill them up.
Yeah.
So that was like our like big vision, was to have like this platform that like will match students with startups and like facilitating that like skills growth. Yeah.
Cool. That's amazing. Because it's very interrelated with what we do. Because in our case, it's matchmaking with like professionals and startups, especially like offshore professionals. And then in this case, it's very interesting because it's the part that I see really underserved at the moment. So definitely that's very cool. Can you tell a bit more about the funding bit? So did the Cambridge Fund Catalyst, they gave it the funding during you were a student? Is that the?
So we applied in January or March? April, sorry. We applied in April, and so we ended up like being rewarded like the money. Yeah. And it's kind of like on a reimbursement basis. So like anything we spend towards like within our budget, that will be reimbursed like to a certain amount. Yeah.
Cool. That's pretty cool because it's essentially it's like it's a non-equity based, right? They don't charge equity. Yeah. It's just like
it's like purely like I guess like an initiative to like kind of like uplift like students that have like a genuine interest in like wanting to like make change in the community. If it's like so. What's interesting about like the Catalyst Fund or the Catalyst program is that there's like ideas at all different scales. So like people that want to like interact like internationally, or people that want to do something specifically in a community, or people that want to just like reach out like students in the UK, like as broad as that. I think that's really interesting.
That's really cool. That's amazing. What's your next sort of plan with Verdance Ventures? Like, what's the kind of the roadmap?
Yeah, so I'm currently in conversation with like a few of like the members from like QTech, which is the Cambridge University Technology and Enterprise Club. Cool. Long name. I'm kind of trying to roll out like a pilot program in a sense. Okay. So like building like the platform, and I think like the technical element of that won't be so hard. Yeah. But more so like finding that like it, as an idea it works. Yeah, as a market fit, is like really difficult. Or that's like the most difficult part to like work out. So I'm trying to like build out like a pilot program where you pair a few students, a few startups, get feedback, and then like kind of build from there.
That's amazing. Cool. Well, best of luck with that. It's a great thing that you guys are doing. Perfect. Also, you previously scouted for Kinetic investment, and then you are currently a VC associate for Love Ventures as well. Can you tell me a bit more about your journey into that side of the market, to the VC, like how you started, what attracted you in general?
So originally my interest in VC, so I had previously interned in asset management. Okay. So I worked at UBS and I was working on like the indexed alternatives desk, which was really interesting. Yeah. But I found that working in like a big investment bank, working in like really, really high finance, you almost felt like a sense of disconnection with like the product you're working with. 100%. So like when you're looking at things like carbon neutral gold or like futures on commodities, it's really, or like swaps and things like this, it's really like hard to connect with such products. Yeah,
it's very commoditized.
So I found that I still wanted to work in like the financial services sector, but kind of working with people, having like more so interaction. So I ended up talking to a friend who recommended I applied to Love Ventures. Okay. And that was like my intro to like venture capital as an industry, which I found really interesting. And then Kinetic actually reached out to me. Okay. So I was working with Kinetic Investments as a VC scout. I did that for about 6 months. So I was kind of staying like Cambridge lead. Yeah. So I was like going to like events held by like the Cambridge like blockchain clubs, and finding like founders and like writing their names down and like sending them like as recommendation to Kinetic, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah, so that was like kind of my intro to the VC space, the startup space.
That's pretty cool. Was it the same for Love Ventures? You were like regionally in Cambridge sourcing startups for them, or was it like just?
For Love Ventures, I guess I was doing more like business development in my first internship. So I was kind of working dual function between investments and investor relations. Okay. Mostly investor relations, so like fundraising, prepping for like events, like to try and like source investors and like talking to founders every once in a while on the investment side. But that's quite interesting.
Nice. That's amazing. Cool. And can you tell, so with Love Ventures, it's been about 1.5 years about that, right? Can you tell a bit what's been the most interesting startup you had in the deal flow? Maybe just, something just unusual or outstanding. Like what was the most interesting one?
So the most interesting startup I remember, specifically because I'm this founder, like we had spoke on like a Zoom meeting, and then like I had actually met them in the office, and they were giving like their pitch, and they were talking through their pitch deck. It was the founder of Gendo AI.
Okay.
It's like a company that kind of they do real estate like renders. So for like housing extensions or for like
cool.
I don't know, like if you wanted to like build something in your garden, they would like have it so that they would like AI generate like this scan with different materials.
That's cool.
The founder came from like an architecture background.
Yeah.
And like previously I had been like really interested like in architecture.
Architecture.
So I think if I wasn't studying like geography and business, like
architecture,
it would have been architecture, to be honest. So when like he came and he gave his pitch and he was talking about like the product, I was like blown away. And then we did like this like demo, kind of like testing his product against like other products that do similar things, like more general like AI, like in image generation that's less tailored to like architecture or like making like you know, really complex renders. And I found that his product was just so amazing.
Different level, yeah.
And I was just like, wow, like this is so cool. Like I didn't know that you could just do things like this and you could take like the render and like directly hand that off to like an architect or like a company and like actually start building something with that. And I thought that was just such an interesting like middle ground for AI to like work.
Way of doing things. That's pretty cool. Was it with Love Ventures or was Kinetic? Did they end up investing in it?
No, I think we were too late to the round actually. Okay. I think we were too late.
Interesting.
But it was such a missed opportunity. I thought they were so cool, to be honest. But
that's cool. No, definitely I need to check them out after the podcast. It's a pretty interesting concept. Did the guy did he reach out to you, like just called on LinkedIn, or like how did he reach out to you?
I know he had spoke to someone else in the investments team. So I kind of got like later. Like I think they had been in communication before like I started my internship.
That's pretty cool. Interesting. No, definitely I need to check them out after the podcast. And also the next question I have, so from your experience that you've had, what would you say the red flags that you see in founders or in pitch decks like right away? Are there anything like that?
I think a red flag, so I've spoken to like only a handful of founders like in like the love venture space. But I think what's really hard to overcome is a founder that, well, self-belief is like important, but like a founder who's unable to like identify like a problem. I don't know if that makes sense, but in the sense that like if a founder really believes in like their idea, but there's not necessarily as big a problem that's being solved.
I see.
I find that like sometimes there's a founder who's really passionate about like, this is like my baby, this is my business, and like I love them, and you know I've done the marketing and I've got partnerships. But then when you understand like the problem they solve is perhaps like really narrow, or someone's already like on the way to solving it. I found that can be really hard to convince someone that something they're so like emotionally attached to may not be like, I may not understand like the usefulness of it. So I think sometimes that level or that layer of communication can be really hard. So I think like having like such strong like emotional connection to the business does like one thing, and there's no flexibility in doing this, and this is what we specialize in. But I think like founders who are more like adaptable or more like open to criticism, I think is like a lot easier to work with. Yeah,
that's a really, really good point actually. So the idea is essentially to structure the problem way more like clear, less on the emotional base, more on the actual like economic. That's a really, really good advice. Anything else, or that's the main one?
No, I think in general, like it's really, I think like someone who can't take criticism very well, or like,
I agree.
If you, I guess like if you give like a suggestion and it's like immediately shut down, there's no like dialogue about it. I think it can be hard to like connect in that sense.
100%. You know, sometimes I have founders, because you know founders see that we fundraise from the VC as well, and they are reaching out quite often just to get some advice. And I'm, especially if it's like through someone send them my way, I'm always trying to help. And there are so many founders that are like, we're changing this problem, like we're solving this problem, changing the whole market. I'm like, okay, so what if actually, for instance, this happens and you guys are like a bit less competitive in the market? And they were like, no way, we've been doing this for like 20 years, you know. It's not. I was like, guys, come on, every investor will challenge you on that. Like, you need to be more flexible with your answers. So I think that's definitely a big problem. Okay, cool. The next question I have, so we were chatting earlier with you on a few days ago, and you mentioned that recently you've been finding some trouble getting willing startups after you moved back to London. Can you share a general impression of the London startup ecosystem? Because, you know, generally it's the biggest, like I think in Europe it's like the biggest concentration of startups, right? But a lot of people argue that recently, especially, the market is going in a weird direction. So share your thoughts on that.
I guess like mine's not like a scientific, I don't have like a scientific answer, but I do think at the moment maybe it's like the state of the economy in London, but I think like startups are finding it like really hard to like take off in that sense.
Yeah.
I think London has always been good at like incubating startups and getting them from like point zero to like
to something. Yeah.
to point 10, for example.
Yeah.
But startups that are like really taking off, I think there's like a bit of difficulty there. I think it's like it's hard regulatory, it's hard economically.
Yeah.
I think like you see exceptions like in like the challenger banks and like a few of the fintechs that are really taking off. But I think a lot of startups are in the London space are like maybe struggling to find this support to really go long and to really like get to higher levels, if that makes sense.
I get it 100%. Would you say they're struggling more at the sort of like pre-seed, like super early stage, or more of the stage when they, let's say, get to Series A and then actually taken off properly? Would you say it's like which one of these?
I'd say like after Series A.
After Series A.
I think really easy, not really easy, but obviously it takes work and it takes a good idea. But getting to Series A, I think is like part of the problem. But I think like within the London ecosystem, without like American backing or corporate venture capital, getting beyond Series A is, I think it's extremely hard. I think there's niches that do better than others. Like biotechnology is receiving like tons of investment. And fintech, like
of course.
of course. But I think for the most part there's a lot of difficulty in getting beyond that and really going far.
I 100% agree. Like I see, you know, because I think for pre-seed, well, I think currently for the like early stage, it's still more difficult than previously, definitely. But I think still for pre-seed, the UK is doing like quite good with like SCIS, AIS funds. It's still relatively doable to fundraise. But Series A plus, like from what I've been speaking with people, like everyone is going to US.
Yeah, like, and I feel like especially the SCIS and the EIS funds, I think the UK is like very well cultivated for that. I think we have like a very like old economy.
Exactly.
You know, like wealth management, wealth preservation, like these are like the butler economy of the UK.
Yeah.
We've always been successful at doing this. So I think when it comes to like the tax benefits and the write-offs you get for like investing in such companies, I think we're always going to be good at that stage. But I think going 100%. Beyond is like, it's challenging to do really well within the UK, I think.
Yeah, 100%. The point is like, SCIS and the VCs, they're really aligned with this concept of like, you know, being more or less risk-free, with a bit more like, wealth preservation. 100%. I definitely agree. Do you see this like changing in any point in the future, or like what's your take on that?
I have a bit of an interesting perspective, I think. I think the UK is attempting to become more like American by culture. I think like we're adopting like longer working hours, or like we're considering like, for example, like opening the London tubes for the 24 hours to keep people like working longer. I think we're aiming to adopt this American working culture, but I almost feel that there's going to be a swing in a sense. I think we're going to try and lean that way a little further. But I think we'll go back. I think Britain has always been Britain, and I think not to say that we're resistant to change, but I do think like we're quite we're a country that's like plagued by inertia. We very much stick within the motions. So I don't think it's going to change much. And I do think like things like Project Europe, like as Europe starts to change and Europe's like opening up, I think we might follow Europe a little bit, but I don't think we'll completely go all the way American in that sense.
Yeah, actually, I agree on that. I agree 100%, because, you know, if something works well, like let it work. You don't necessarily need to aim to be like another US.
Yeah, don't change it.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Okay, perfect. If you, by the way, before we get to the next one, in terms of the like events in London, have you attended any like startup events so far? Like what have you seen there? Like any interesting founders, like generally?
No, in London, no. I would feel like I was more involved in the Cambridge ecosystem. But
really?
Yeah, I've just like graduated. I've just kind of got into things, and like London, I haven't really explored yet.
Yeah,
I intend to, but not right at the moment.
Yeah, I think from September onwards should start being a bit more active. So hopefully,
I think at the moment, like a lot of VCs, a lot of like startups are on holiday. Europe,
Fair enough. Yeah, that's true. Okay, the next question I have: if you could, taking into account the current state and your experience on things, if you could give one advice to founders that are fundraising right now, like what would it be? You know, generally.
I think visibility. So like what I've seen like as a scout, just like having received feedback on like the kind of companies that I'm like pushing forward to like investors. I think founders who have like a really visible like media presence. It doesn't mean like spamming on LinkedIn and posting a bunch of things, but having like really tangible like evidence of work or dedication or drive. And I think that idea of like a personal brand being tied to a founder is increasingly important. I think like founders who are also like thought leaders, or they're very like impactful in certain communities, are like are even more like sought after. And I think really having like visibility as a founder and really like cultivating like it doesn't have to be like a full-fledged community, but like cultivating a sense of like people are aware of who you are is almost just as important as having like a great product. Because if you have a great product and no one knows you have a great product, then like it's not really going to help you. And even if someone comes across this product, there's no social proof in the sense.
Of course, yeah.
But I think like social proof in the startup space is like really important. And
that's true.
I think naturally the UK is quite like nepotism based. Who you know, who you've met, who can vouch for you, who can speak for you in the rooms you're not in. I think it's really important. So building that like that brand, that visibility, I think is really important.
And I think also like the very good point is that, like you need to be creative, but you don't necessarily need like funding for that. You can still get creative and like just get the exposure by your own means, you know, without even like doing it like on a wide commercial basis.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. That's a great advice. Okay. In terms of we touched on this a little bit previously, but in terms of the VC market, how would you assess the current state of the UK? Like, you know, generally, not specifically like pre-seed or like later stage, just generally, how would you assess the VC market right now?
I think it's been hard the past year. I think EIS did bad or didn't do as well last year. I think underperformed slightly. I think it's difficult. I think it's not necessarily just a function of like the VC market, but I think it's a function of the UK's place in like rapid change. I think the UK has maybe not been as adaptable to like, you know, the rise of AI and what's going on. And the UK is kind of like still has some like post-pandemic like growth pains with what's going on at the moment, and, you know, changes in government, and people are a little uncertain what legislation is going to look like for the EIS schemes, for VCs, for investing in like small companies or SMEs. I think it's difficult at the moment, and I think what I'm beginning to understand is that there's a real like desire to find like that certainty. People want like that sense of security and like what's going to happen, but I don't think we have that current trust in like our government, or even with like what's going on in AI. I think you hear like every week like a new AI startup that's going to change everything. And I think it can be really hard to like to keep up when information is constantly swaying, and it's really hard to like discern which of this information is really valuable and what is like really good. And I think the UK in that sense almost plays a role as like a follower. And I think we're maybe a bit late to the party at times, but I think we're still good intentions. So I think it's slow at the moment. And I think it's not doing bad, but I think it is like trying to find its bearing in the movements.
It's actually a really interesting point. Would you say this like current state of the VC market is somewhat affected by the general like socioeconomic like state, you know, people being a bit uncertain about like general the economy, you know, the interest rate? Would you say it's like correlated in that?
I'd say they're linked. I think entrepreneurship is like, I think there's lots of debates where entrepreneurship comes from. Some people say it comes from like hardship, or in times of uncertainty, you know, great ideas can come and like rise to the top. But I think that's not going to be representative of like
of the whole market. I agree.
I think when you're looking at the market, I think like the sentiment at the moment is a little bit shaken.
I agree. That's actually a really good point. Okay, perfect. The next two questions, we're gonna dive deep into these ones. So these two topics I'm really interested in generally, and this morning I was enjoying reading your articles about these whole topics. So I think the first one I'm really interested in. I was reading about emerging markets. I was reading a few of the articles about emerging markets, and some of them were also related to like climate tech, green tech. Can you in general share your thoughts on that? Because there were a few points, and maybe from your perspective would be great to hear, you know, in general, like what's your, you know, very generic viewpoint on the whole thing.
So one thing I guess in one of my articles I was mentioning was like specifically I was talking about African VC, African startups, specifically looking at Nairobi and Kenya as like a case study. I think I was having conversations about this for like a while, but I think there is definitely something that I think UK VC investors or people who invest in VCs have to gain from looking into like Africa as not only a geography, but like as an actual opportunity. I think when we look at things like agri-tech, climate tech, and like the bioengineering of things like seeds and like these very like niche areas, I think there is something to be gained in these places. And I think even if you look at like Kenya, for example, they have M-Pesa, which is just like massive fintech across Africa. And it's almost like swarmed the rest of like fintech evolution within the country. And I think I don't know, I just think, me personally, I think African VC is so interesting because they're solving problems that aren't necessarily divorced from the problems that we may face like in the UK.
Okay.
And I think, in a sense, there's an opportunity there, not only for like companies to go over there and to solve problems or for business models to be replicated, but for like genuine like value add. I think there's the argument for like Pan-African investment and the idea that this investment is not only like a function of like, you know, VC and like trying to make returns and trying to find unicorns, but like genuine like development finance and the interest and those kind of interests.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really interesting point, because, you know, I've recently, like a lot of people would argue, like I've recently seen it myself, that a lot of developing markets, they are looking into the areas, like for instance, agri-tech is a perfect example, because UK is not investing much into that, you know, because generally, the market is not there, and also like they just don't see this problem. But I'm recently looking a lot after Kazakhstan as the market, like in Central Asia, and they've been like, I don't know, I've just seen how it changed over like the last, I don't know, like maybe 5 years. 5 years ago, there was not a single VC there, I think, and now after 5 years, there are like VCs who are given, like I've recently like just on Instagram I follow one founder, and I've recently seen this guy fundraised like 1 million in Kazakhstan. I'm like, what is going on? Like, it's not even that easy to fundraise 1 million in the UK, not speaking even about Kazakhstan. So would you say these are the markets that potentially would be at some point maybe outperforming even? Would you say?
I think outperform in terms of growth, I think, is like definitely an opportunity. I think my personal view is that I think investing in like these economies are going to grow too quickly, even just like on a population level, on a GDP level, they're going to grow too quickly. And I think startups almost like plug this gap that like what like large corporates that are like a bit divorced, like transnational investment, can't really interact with. And I think a great example is the Nairobi Angels Network, and there's that's such an active like network, for example, in Africa, and they kind of set a standard for what investment can look like. And I think there are in a sense like regulatory hurdles that are kind of like overcome with like the governments being like more keen to have like investment into these spaces. There's more like liberty, there's like grants. And I think specifically if you look into like agri-tech and what's going on in agriculture, when the UK was in the EU, there was like I think there was a large talking point on like farmers, like how many crops they can have, how much land they can have, what they can do with exports, and like price controls, and like all of these like limitations and standards on farmers became like a large topic of discussion. But then when you look into like agri-tech startups in like Lagos and like Nairobi, and these startups just kind of like develop these ideas and they just kind of take off and they work really well. And it's because like the government almost like facilitates, so there's not like a standard of there's not like such stringent like regulations of you have these crops, you have to export them at like this price, or there's controls on like how much like market, like in terms of like market share you can earn. And I think there is definitely something to be said like in these markets that regulations will come up and standards will be formed. But I think at the moment they're very dynamic and there's a lot of movement, and I think there's something to look into.
That's really cool. You know, I just remembered also one thing. Recently, I was it's another founder that I follow on Instagram as well from Kazakhstan. These guys also fundraised, and you know, I've recently seen them going to a meeting with presidential administration of Ghana, but these guys are in Kazakhstan, right? And I was thinking like probably the reason for that being obviously they probably didn't do the cold outreach to the presidential administration in Ghana meeting. So the idea is that if you fundraise from the VCs in like developing countries, they're like, I think your go-to market will be also way quicker, because probably these VCs have closer links to the government. They'll have easier access to, I don't know, big companies. They'll kind of help you get there quicker as well.
I've definitely seen like when there's like networks like for investment, I think these investments almost become pooled in a sense. So like big organizations like the IMF, the African Development Bank, all become like involved in the process of investing in startups in these geographies. So I guess like there's almost like what could have been like a very disparate and very like segregated like system of like different hubs in different places. There's almost like global eyes that kind of seek to channel these investments into like the best places. So I think it's really structured in that sense.
100% agreed. And also getting a little back to the point of the UK market, I was also reading this article about the startup culture in UK compared to US, China, about strong investment landscape, but still a bit conservative, like in terms of the general approach to risk. And specifically about AI, can you share your viewpoint about like the UK stand on AI? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I think we have a fear of being like not a fear of being a leader, but I think we like naturally are quite like, we're like a community of followers. I think we have great like academic institutions, we have great like firms, and we have like a lot of like money that's just floating around. We have like a lot of legacy wealth. But I think mobilizing that, we've really struggled. So in terms of like the open AIs, the deep seeks, we don't have like anything like that. We have like great research labs and great AI labs, but I think we haven't necessarily pulled anything into like actualizing like that $1 billion, $1 trillion like idea. And I think that's kind of, I think the UK's like organizational culture has always been like that, like the tall grass syndrome, like not really wanting to stand out, not really wanting to be too ambitious. I think we're a very safe playing country. And so while I think we have like the talent and we have like the funds, culturally I think that's kind of like a limiting factor.
I 100% get what you mean. I 100% agree. Like the UK is essentially, it's not on the same, it's not within the same, how to put it, like if let's say we put the US and China on the same, like this innovation kind of like race, UK is a bit like on the following side more than the actual.
Like I think innovation is made and the UK like does great things with the innovations made, but I don't think we're necessarily the ones that make the first steps. Like I guess like AI boomed and a ton of UK like AI startups like have just emerged, and great UK AI labs and like in different universities and like individuals and like corporates, but we're not like they're actually like changing a frontier. We kind of don't fulfill that purpose.
I get what you mean. And I think especially like keeping in mind that the UK actually, well, probably has the capacity to do it, but it's just not doing it.
No, completely.
I get it. That's a really interesting point. Okay. And in general, like, what would you say? I just came up with another question. In general, what verticals are you personally like most interested in? Like, as in, just generally on the market, is it like more, into green tech, more into AI? Like, what's personally you're sort of like looking after most?
So for me, what I'm like personally interested in, like outside of like business, I'm really interested in like green tech, climate tech, and then fintech. I think green tech, climate tech, almost like as both like adaptation and mitigation strategies for like what's going on with climate change, they almost like provide like a way forward for how business can really be mobilized in really like impactful ways. I don't know, I hold quite like a critical view on like what greenwashing looks like in conventional finance and throwing money into like carbon tokens. Like, is it always like being used the best way? So I really think that like innovative like green tech, climate tech solutions, I think that's really good. Like that's really impactful for me. I also think fintech is really interesting, but specifically in an emerging market space. I think like giving people access to like credit, or if it's like banking. I think these are really things that like change people's lives. The opportunity for people to get loans and like start entrepreneurship, I think these are really transformational for like people's material standards of living. So I think that emerging market element of fintech, I'm really interested in. And I think there's also like areas of like tokenization and I think things with like ETFs and like that was kind of went a bit far, like we almost went too far right that we ended up left. That ETFs and tokenization kind of lost its concept, lost its concept. It became like a buzzword. Like everyone has a metaverse, for example. But I think like tokenization like in finance, I think is still like something I'm
it's actually really interesting point, because you know what, I realized, I'm thinking that the UK is like, the way the UK uses fintech, it's more of a like convenience, better efficiency, things like that. But in emerging markets, it's actually like the game changers. Like if you do the fintech in emerging market, it can change the whole like, there is this case, like I just want to share with you as well, it might be interesting. There is this case, the startup is called Kaspi, and this is the startup in Kazakhstan. So these guys, they just created it as a I don't know, it was like just probably like a digital banking or something. And then over, I don't know how long they've been actually out there for, but I think maybe like, I don't know, 5 years or about that, maybe 7 years. These guys, they turned this like banking into a super app where all of the economy of the country is based on. If you're, I don't know, paying for parking or ordering something, I don't know, if you're paying taxes or if you're ordering something online, it all happens in one app. Imagine. And it's like when you mentioned fintech and emerging markets, I think that's how I see it. Like when you actually create something that just like changes the economy upside down.
No, completely. And I think the UK is great for having things like fintech that's like convenience for like your mortgage, helps you calculate things like this, or puts money aside into like investment ISAs, for example. I think we're great with that, but I think there is definitely a conversation to be had about these business models being translated into emerging markets when these problems eventually do arise. But I guess that is kind of...
So far they have bigger problems.
I think, you know, trying to predict what the future looks like, it's a bit hard. But I think even when we look at like business models like Uber, for example, like Uber has kind of been replicated in Southeast Asia with like what Grab does. So Grab is like for everything as well. It's like delivery, transport. And I think you can kind of see how like business models are almost translated, but they're done in like a different way. They're almost like, I guess like they get the most, what do you call it? Like the most like immediate material rewards out of like solving those problems.
That's actually a great point. Interesting. I really like how we went towards this topic because it's really I haven't thought that much about it recently. I have a friend who is always pushing me towards like oh look, we need to think of some idea, we need to invest in some ideas in emerging markets, and I'm always like thinking about it, but then I'm kind of like, yeah, we're in the UK, we should probably focus on what's going on here. And then when I meet someone and I kind of elaborate on this topic more, it's pretty cool. Cool. And I think just the wrap-up question before we finish. Tell a bit more about the next steps for you, like personally, for yourself, and maybe business-wise, you know, kind of what are you looking for ahead?
So I guess personally, so I'm still interning with Love Ventures. Still going to be working investor relations and investments, keeping at that. With Verdance Ventures, I guess like the wider goal is to form that pilot. So to connect with startups, to connect with students. I think connecting with students is always gonna be easy. There's so many keen students. The job market's terrible. But I think like really having like genuine and close connections with like founders is something I'm really trying to cultivate over the next few weeks, over the next few months, and launching that pilot, and I guess like coming back with the results from the pilot and bringing them to people.
Amazing. Cool. Yeah, I think actually, like, you know, the side of the founders also has a huge demand for interns, especially, you know, probably corporates, they're not that much in a need of interns anymore, but like the startups, I think they actually need people helping with things. So I think it's actually like there will be a really good synergy on both sides. So yeah, great. Garrett, thanks so much for coming. It's great to have you here. I'll leave all the links to your social media and to Verdance Ventures on the in the description. And yeah, thanks so much. It was great to have a chat. Thanks so much for coming.
No, it was a great chat.